Through Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hey folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. It's been all of 3 days since we last spoke. It's nice to have you back, nice to be back. I'm still here in Thailand, roasting hot, having a great time with the kids and the grandkids. I hope you two are having a good time. But lots been happening the last few days. As we said on Wednesday, this had a long way to run, and we've not been disappointed. There's plenty to discuss, and I'm joined tonight by my friends from the Borders, Dr. Yvonne Ridley.
Except I'm in Aberdeen.
Aberdeen, Cervixhold in Aberdeen, no less.
Sunny Aberdeen, yes.
Yeah, it's looking nice and sunny there. Good. I always remember Billy Connolly saying at Aberdeen, the Gaelic for freezing. He actually did an adjective as well, but I'll not use it. It's a watershed thing. Nice to see you, my friend. How are you? Good?
I'm great. I see that the saga of the SNP is a bit like Nicola's farewell speech. It's never ending and continuing.
Yeah, no. Well, that's why we're here. We'd have nothing to talk about if they didn't.
Talk about.
Yeah, we shouldn't be ungrateful. And of course, from down there in, I think, Manchester, or you could be somewhere else even. I don't know. I can't keep up with you. Where are you, my friend?
I'm in a very famous place today, Roddy. I'm in Bucksburn, outside Davies Chipper, looking into the stall which is set up for our candidate Charlie Abel for the Dice, Bucksburn and Dainstone by-election. So we're ready, willing and able to get fired in about it today. Yvonne and I had a very successful women's meeting in Aberdeen last night, so it's all things Dean this weekend.
Good. I'm going to ask you about that in a minute. I tell you what, I could murder a fish supper myself right now. Oh, you've made me. I'm salivating. I'm slabbering like a poacher's dog here. Now, we are hoping that our Phil will join us, but due to time restraints, it's like, I don't know, 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning somewhere he is. So if he appears dishevelled, however he appears, he'll be here. If not, you'll just have to make do with myself and my two dear friends here. So since the 3 days since we spoke, there's a lot been going on, but you alluded to it there just a second ago. So you and Yvonne were up there on a women's rally, or what was it, in Aberdeen?
Women's event in Aberdeen where we were discussing mainly the Gender Recognition Reform Bill and where it goes from here. So last night's discussions were probably very different than they would have been had the First Minister not intimated her intention to resign earlier in the week. What we found very interesting, as did the audience, is the SNP timetable for Miss Sturgeon's replacement, because it looks like her replacement will perhaps unusually be in place prior to the expiry of the deadline for the Scottish Government to take the judicial review against Westminster in relation to the Section 35 on the GRR bill. So it looks almost as if Miss Sturgeon is passing the ball to somebody else and thereby passing the buck. So there's much debate within the women's movement about whether her successor will be as laser-focused, single-minded and determined to take that place, or whether common sense will prevail and there will be decisions taken that reflect the views of the country as opposed to the votes of the MSPs who shoved it through contrary to what their constituents in the main wanted. So women were pleased to be able to gather, certainly very relieved to be able to speak honestly and openly without being labelled as phobic or difficult. All views last night, and some were controversial and some were in the minority, but all views were listened to and all views were valid. So we discussed many things that relate to women's needs, women's rights, and the reasons why not only do we have single-sex protections and single-sex exceptions, but there was a very strong feeling in the room that there's huge support for the ALBA policy of, come Independence Day, we create a written constitution within which we enshrine, including particularly women's rights based on biological sex and not anything invented or, you know, divorced from reality, which is the road that we seem to have gone down in the last couple of years. So a worthwhile event which will be replicated around the country, including next Saturday when we have a national ALBA Women's Conference in Edinburgh, part of which is open to all women. You don't have to be a member to attend the morning session, where we're going to have some invited speakers as well as members of the party speaking.
Whereabouts in Edinburgh, Yvonne, when's the kick-off?
It's in the Charterist Centre, and we can put up an advert for that, but the details are available on the ALBA website and on all social media.
Yep, got to get there, ladies. You don't have to be a member of the ALBA party or any party. You want to get there. Just ladies, no gentlemen allowed. Oh, lost you there, Eva.
Ladies only, no men allowed on Saturday.
Ladies, well, they can't self-declare, no? No. Just a wee joke, folks. Just a wee joke.
No self-declaring.
Yvonne, you two were at the ladies' conference. Did you enjoy it? Did you get a buzz from it?
There was a lot of energy in that room and lots of really good ideas. The one thing that is very clear is that the GRR bill, it's like trying to kill a cockroach. You stamp on it and it's down, and then suddenly it gets back up again. And we got a hint of this from Mike Russell, who said that he was hoping the next SNP candidate, or he was expecting the next SNP leader to carry on with Sturgeon's legacy. Well, the only legacy she's got is this toxic, rancid GRR bill. And it's quite clear that of all the candidates, once they've jumped through the various hoops with the SNP, it's quite clear that their first major hurdle is going to be pushing the GRR bill through the courts. I mean, the lawyers must be making a fortune out of the SNP.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 7 years in the making, it was thrown out by Westminster, and they're still trying to revive it. It should be called the Lazarus Bill. Really, we've had enough of it. It's like trying to reheat toast or a souffle. It's not going to work. Move on.
You're right. I said a while ago, I wrote a blog saying, I said, the only people who are going to enjoy this are the lawyers, because even if it hadn't been stopped by Section 35, it was bound to have been a legal challenge by someone. So the lawyers, as you say, must be licking their lips at this.
Absolutely. It's just never ending. You know, it's just not over yet. And to all the women who won't wished, which is probably about 90% of the female population, you know, we're going to have to go back into the breach once more. It seems that all our jubilation at the demise of Sturgeon and the GRR bill, it's too early. We've still got to go into battle yet again to get rid of this toxic, misogynistic, vile bill.
Yeah, I agree. And I think our viewers agree. Eva, the fact that Mike Russell, a man who I used to have a great deal of respect for, he's turning around and saying, you know, you've got to keep going with the trans bill, the GRRB. We've had Lord Keane, I mean, who was the I don't know. You're the lawyer. I can't remember the head of the Supreme Court called. You know, the head honcho. I'm sure is not the name, but you know what I'm talking about. He was the first. Am I right? And he was a Scottish judge. He was the one that came out right after the GRRB was hit with the Section 35 and said, Sturgeon, don't challenge us in the court. You will lose. You cannot win. You'll just waste taxpayers' money. But here's the thing that brought down, and there's no dispute, or I don't think there's a dispute. If you believe there is, Eva, tell me. There's no dispute that Sturgeon was brought down by this GRRB bill. And yet there's people like Mike Russell saying, well, let's keep going. We've been beaten once, let's get beaten again. It's insanity. Or am I missing something?
It's like the boxer that won't lie down. There's one inevitable outcome to this bill, and part of it has been to divide the independence movement and to divide the SNP. What I think is incredibly interesting, though, is that the SNP clearly need to keep the Greens on side to maintain the majority in the Scottish Parliament. So that really means, as we've said so many times before, that it's women's rights and women's protections and the single-sex exceptions that are the price of that coalition and the price of that majority. And you begin to wonder, when is a price too high? And I rather think that the SNP, if they continue down this line, are selling their souls for the sake of power, which has become somehow addled and corrupted by motivations that are not the motivations or the priorities of the majority of the people of Scotland. Mm-hmm. You know, obviously not all of whom support independence, but certainly many of whom support other policies which are social democratic and sensible and decent. So the SNP risk alienating people who would have supported policies of theirs other than independence because they cannot throw the others. I'm not convinced that GR brought the First Minister down. I think it contributed to her bad publicity. But what is a huge concern for certainly Yvonne and me and for the women we met last night is the insistence by the Scottish Government, and this is obviously backed up by the Lady Haldane decision, that if you have a GRC, that changes your legal sex for all purposes. That's the problem. And what continues to be the problem, as evidenced in the last few weeks by all these awful cases of criminals or cases still to come to court or that are just coming through court just now or are still being investigated, is that Scotland has predators just like any other country, but some of these predators have been able or will be able to take advantage of loopholes which exist not only in current legislation but in current guidance and in current practice, seen most especially obviously with the Scottish Prison Service, but it also applies in other areas of public life. So there is a serious job of work to do, and I think it was Joanna Cherry perhaps who pointed out yesterday that though the priority remains independence, it's time for a reset of the entire approach of the SNP towards respecting others with different views and bringing people together in a fashion where opposing voices are heard and there is real democracy, as opposed to what seems to be diktat from on high, where many competing views are ignored. So in turning back again to court processes, you would almost think the SNP were doing this deliberately. They've had the nonsense of, you know, all the other legal actions that have gone badly wrong for them. We don't need to list them all. We know what they are. It's cost a fortune. We're not needing to spend more money on something that's divisive, particularly because you probably noticed that the Russell Finlay Amendment and the Michelle Thompson Amendment to the bill, which had to do with sex offenders and protections for people, were obviously voted down. What was passed in the bill was an amendment from Gillian Martin in relation to sex offenders requiring to tell the police if they were applying for a GRC. But it became obvious during the course of that debate on that amendment and subsequent to this that the Scottish Government and the committee dealing with the bill had not spoken to the police about this and about its implications. Now, the police are already struggling with the implications of the hate crime legislation, which I think we'll get on to later when we're talking about Hamza Yusuf's part in this. But the police are not able to implement the Hate Crime Bill / Act for at least another year. The police are not happy about that. They are not happy at, in effect, more obligations being imposed upon them in terms of the GRR bill and what they'll have to do without prior consultation with them. So the SNP have not just alienated hundreds of thousands of women and men in Scotland who worry about single-sex exceptions, etc. They've annoyed the police. They've annoyed numerous women's organisations and grassroots organisations of women. And what seems to be the flavour is that this legislation, in effect, is rammed through mainly by women who are well-heeled, well-paid, who are not likely to be in prison beside male offenders, not likely to be in a hospital ward beside male patients, and who don't have to worry so much about the implications of going into changing rooms and there are men there, going into council or municipal swimming pools or swimming baths and there's men in changing rooms there. All these things are things that are happening to folk that are out with the Holyrood political bubble. And that's where somehow the SNP's got to get a reset and get back to reality, because this, blinding us with, so-called science and fancy words doesn't cut it anymore, and it continues to jeopardise independence, which is what's meant to be the raison d'etre.
It's Yvonne, the fact of Mike saying, "Oh, let's keep going and keep doing it and go to court and fight it." I think it was Einstein, wasn't it? Said insanity is repeating the same mistakes over and over again, expecting a different outcome. I can see no logic, and this is taking away the fact that all of us here oppose this bill. But I think the runes tell you you're not going to succeed in court. What is the point of doing this, Yvonne?
It's just a mindless distraction to appease and pacify the Scottish Greens that the SNP need to be able to control Holyrood. And of course, as I keep telling people, the Scottish Greens aren't like their cuddly English counterparts. They're a vicious bunch of fascists and rammed with men who hate women. I mean, Patrick Harvey is, you can tell that he has issues with strong women. He's a nasty little piece of work. And this whole charade is not only going to cost the Scottish taxpayer a shed load of money, it is a diversionary tactic to appease the Greens, but also, I think, to keep the spotlight off one of the real motivations for the First Minister's resignation. I know that we spend most of our time on Prism, and especially Angry Phil saying it's time for her to go, it's time for her to go. Well, she's gone. But now, we have to look at why has she gone at the height of her career. She's the equivalent of a football manager who's just won the FA Cup, the trophy cabinet's filled. On paper, Nicola Sturgeon was a hugely successful politician. And it just seems a very strange time to go. I think that there's something looming on the horizon that maybe we don't know about. Maybe it's wrapped up with the finances of the party. They still can't explain where £600,000 has gone. They still can't explain why Nicola Sturgeon's husband, Peter Morell, wrote out a cheque for
£107,000. Mike Russell also said, "Oh, forget about it. That's okay. That's been taken care of." I thought, "Oh, that's good. So you have to forget about that." You've not to mention it, Yvonne. It's okay.
Well, I won't forget about it because, you know, like one of many people who desperately wants independence, I paid into that fund.
Yeah.
And
Well,
the fund that I was
missing,
assured would be
well, if it's not
ring-fenced
missing,
and protected.
where is it? Where is it? It wasn't in the accounts, and we haven't got receipts for it. So where is it?
Well, you know, I mean, it's one of the greatest vanishing acts. There'll be a film about it soon, probably. It's as, you know, like the Brinks Mat robbery. The money has gone and nobody is prepared to say where it has gone.
But you might just say, forget about it. You know, move on. Nothing to see here. Move on. It's an absolute joke. I mean, going back to what you were saying about the people who get sex offenders have to tell the police if they intend to get a GRC. I mean, it's like saying to a burglar going to the police. By the way, you know I'm a burglar, so I'm going out to work tonight. You should really know that. I'm ready to go out. It's a bloody nonsense, Eva. Well, you deal with criminal. Well, you don't. You know what I mean? But you're in the legal profession. Has it been your experience that criminals tend to tell the police what they're going to do?
Quite the opposite, obviously. This is all such an awful distraction and a diversion, as Yvonne says, because what we want to be doing is talking about how to get to independence. And it was no surprise, but it was a disappointment to see that in the light of Nicola Sturgeon's resignation or intention to resign, the SNP have cancelled their urgent emergency independence conference. Now, we've talked before, you calculated, Roddy, the number of days that would elapse between the Supreme Court decision and the conference taking place. It was something like 4 months, is that right?
119 days.
Right. 119 days comprises an emergency reaction in the eyes of the SNP. That's pitiful, absolutely pitiful. That's worse than, you know, trying to turn the super tanker. It just beggars belief. We've said before there should have been a strategy in place. There wasn't a strategy in place when the Supreme Court decision was issued. That's what this conference was supposed to begin to address. Now, it should have been an all-party, cross-party, no-party conference with a collegiate approach whereby you had the best brains, the best strategists, the people that know what they're talking about, the activists and the heart and the soul and the guts of the independence movement getting together to talk in probably radical terms about the action that is needed across very many fronts, whether that's domestic, whether it's in Westminster or in Holyrood or internationally. That's what should have happened. But given that the SNP wouldn't agree with that position, perhaps the next best thing was for everybody else to have their own meetings, conferences and whatever, hopefully with a view to having an independence convention. Now what we see is the SNP have cancelled their one that's due next month. They could have gone ahead with that and had the leadership all participating in it, and they could have had a vote by their members on the way forward. Other parties, including Alba, have been able to do that. So they've cancelled that. So where lies independence as far as the Scottish Government's concerned? The Scottish Greens are doing nothing about it because it's really not their raison d'etre. They actually have no interest in it. They've only got ministers in the Scottish Government just now because we're not independent and because the SNP needs their presence to give them a working majority. So that takes us back to what are the SNP doing actively to gain our independence? And they're doing nothing. They're doing nothing. That's the truth of it. They're having a wee odd meeting here and there, and they're watching to see what happens in the grassroots. As a party, they're not active. They've got a Believe in Scotland liaison with Business for Scotland, who also have meetings. They deliver leaflets, but they're not out on the streets. They are not bombarding everybody with the reasons why there's a positive case for independence and why it's necessary and urgent. And the SNP are falling out with each other about whether or not the de facto referendum is dead in the water. If it's only half dead, would there be one in Holyrood? Would it be in Westminster? And all along, the answer's within their grasp. We've got a First Minister who's resigned. We could use that as leverage to head into having an electoral event on the 19th of October this year, as promised, because that could be the Holyrood election, because the Holyrood Parliament could be collapsed, and the first step towards that collapse is Nicola Sturgeon's resignation. They can use the 2016 Scotland Act to change the standing orders so that they can collapse the Parliament with a vote of 50%, and then get into an election campaign, which is a single issue campaign where United for Scotland, One Scotland team standing for independence. That could happen in October. But the people need a date, and they need to see progress. They need a target to aim for, not this relentless limbo and dangle yet another promise, whether it was a convention or a referendum or another vote or a process or a mandate. We've had how many years of this? It can't go on. Now,
No,
I think
right.
was it Ben McPherson? Ben McPherson dipped a toe in the water the other day, and he had an item. He's obviously a junior minister whose hat is not yet in the ring, but his item was a suggestion that instead of being single-minded towards independence or a referendum, that the SNP should become evolutionist, and they should negotiate with others on this evolutionary approach and an evolutionary process. Other people would call that either status quo or Devo Max. But some cynics like me would say we've actually got less devolution now than we had in 2014, because the powers that are able to be grabbed away from us by Westminster, in part as the result of Brexit and the Tory purge.
Yeah, I'd be more of the, listen, son, get out my way before I put your backside out the way. SNP, get out of here. I wrote a blog this week of lessons not been learned, Yvonne. And one of the things I said, well, Sturgeon stood up there telling us how devoted she was and how wonderful she was and how much problems it was and how she's just so great. She was chocolate, she would lick herself, and she'd done all those things. And she put Scotland always in independence before, and she believed in it vehemently. It was the greatest thing to do. Then why didn't she allow the conference to go ahead? She could have said, I'm going to resign post the conference, but I'm going to lead the party till then. And if you decide you want to go for a Holyrood plebiscite, then I will collapse the Parliament with my resignation. She could have done that if she put Scotland ahead of herself. But the other day, Wednesday, was all about her. It wasn't about what was the best thing. Because now that we don't have this conference in 31 days, so they're going to put it back to when? It'll be put back till October to the annual conference, where they'll then have the vision of the new leader. And we've lost a year. We've lost a spring and summer of campaigning for independence. We've lost the October date for an independence plebiscite. All they've done is kick it down the can down the road again, Yvonne, haven't they?
My biggest fear is that she'll do a Boris Johnson and try and make a comeback and put herself up for selection. I mean, it's really, this is the longest farewell, the longest goodbye, with a promise that nothing will change on the horizon. And I don't think people in Scotland will wear it. The reason why she cancelled the public meeting is, when was the last time that SNP members really had a chance to get together and raise and air grievances and ask awkward questions? They haven't since before COVID. And I think that the leadership of the SNP is reluctant to hold any sort of public gathering for fear everyone turns up with their pitchforks and torches and flames. There's a lot of angry people in the SNP ranks who love the party but know that they're being hoodwinked. Mm-hmm. And at least when Sturgeon made her resignation speech, that was the light at the end of the tunnel. but it wasn't. It's some guy with a torch waving, telling everybody they're halfway through. This is a never-ending saga in which we are all being treated like idiots. And, you know, they're assembling various runners and riders, none of which look fit for purpose. And it is a very, very depressing scene at the moment, but we have to really stand up and call an end to it. You know, Scotland deserves much better than this bunch of well, it's too early in the morning, but anyway, it's really we deserve better.
I should say, Yvonne, we seem to have lost Roddy.
I'm back.
Is him coming back again? Here he is. I was just about to interject there,
It
Roddy.
was probably better without me, actually.
Well, in your temporary absence, I found something that I've really got to say, and it is that a milestone has been reached in Scotland today, because 250,000 baby boxes have been delivered. And isn't that a fantastic? But it is not Nicola Sturgeon's legacy. It is the legacy of the man who brought the baby box to Scotland, a former children's minister, Mark MacDonald, and I think it's very fitting that we pay tribute to his achievements while I'm here in Aberdeen and Yvonne's just a wee bit down the road in Inverurie. So well done, Mark MacDonald. Your name will go down in history for bringing the baby box to the children of Scotland. Good on you.
But I'm not mistaken, Eva, he was actually told to go and investigate it by one Alexander Salmond, who actually put the idea in his head, I believe.
That's right. Alec had heard about it, asked Mark to investigate it, and Mark looked into its use in Finland and brought it to Scotland. So yes, indeed, it was their achievement. But, you know, let's not be niggardly about it, because I'm quite sure there are many other achievements of Miss Sturgeon that we'll be hearing about soon. They might not all be positive, but we have to be positive and look to the future.
Yeah, well, I put out a tweet asking people to tell me, you know, her achievements since 2014, November. I've not had a reply over 48 hours. And how much she's advanced the cause of independence, 3 practical things. The answer was no reply. Just to say, you know, water and gin are the same colour. The viewers have to just decide which I'm drinking, water or gin. And we'll send a badge to anyone who gets the right answer.
Well, can I say to you, Roddy, that what people say to me is that they want to see a path towards independence. And yes, I was hoping that with a change in leadership of the SNP, there would be some sort of route map to independence become obvious. But there are actually a number of different potential routes, but none of them are going to take us to independence in the short term unless the SNP hierarchy listen to the advice that they're getting from Joanna Cherry, Ash Regan, and some others about bringing their party together and then reaching out to the wider Yes movement. Rumours in relation to the numbers of members of individual parties and the amount of money that parties have available to them. But as always, the greatest resource in politics, especially in a political movement, is the potential of the people on the streets, the people on the ground, activists who put and have already put their heart and soul into the drive for Scottish independence. Those activists remain all party and no party, and we need a leader who is a yes movement separately from a leader of a government and the leaders of the individual political parties. But we're not going to get any of that until old wounds are left alone. They'll not heal yet. It'll take a long time for that to happen, if ever. But what we need to see is an acceptance from the party of government that some of them have got it wrong, their strategies have been wrong, and if their priority remains independence, the way to start to achieve that is to bury the hatchet and start to make amends within their own party, and then reach out, but do it quickly. Because if they do it quickly, Scotland benefits. If they drag their heels, they are doing Scotland a disservice, and every day that we delay that drive to independence are more people on the dole, more people hungry, more people cold, more depressed, drugs deaths not being appropriately addressed, suicide not being appropriately addressed, NHS in crisis, education issues, transport issues, the A9 isn't dual, you name it, it's not getting done. Scotland deserves better, deserves that to start today.
You're absolutely right, but that's the problem, Yvonne. Well, Nicola Sturgeon resigned on Wednesday. She's actually not gone. And as long as her husband's in situation, whether under police investigation or not, even if he's as innocent as the pure driven snow, as long as her husband is the chairman of the party, she's still controlling the party. And with Mike Russell's comments, as we alluded to earlier, about, well, don't change anything, you know, keep going with trans and let's negotiate it. Let's say rather go to the courts on it. And with Mike Russell saying that, and if we don't get a change of guard, then we just do the same. What I think it was Wings that said, what's the point of changing the leader if we're just going to do the exact same again? What is the point?
It is. It's more of the same, and really, she's no better than Boris Johnson. He wouldn't go, and he still hangs around Parliament like a bad stench. And she is going to be the same. She's just reluctant to let go. The first thing that should have happened after she said she was stepping down is that Mr. Sturgeon should have stepped down as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, the party, I was a member for a few years, and I'm heartbroken to see how that party is. And I talked to people who were in the SNP for 20, 30 more years, and they're bewildered. It's like a bereavement in the family.
Yes. Yes.
And there is no thought or empathy for any of those people who devoted half their life to the SNP. But there are
more than half their life, let's be honest.
And then this talk about, well, maybe the SNP should amalgamate with Aleppo. I just thought, you know, this surely can't be one of the solutions that people are talking about. In fact, as I said a few days ago, with regards to the Aleppo party, what is Nicola Sturgeon's greatest achievement? And I would say it be the emergence of the Aleppo party and the ISP.
Yeah.
And the other independence movements that flourished and cropped up. You know, it's amazing, isn't it? The SNP have been round for donkey's years, and there's been no other independence movement. And 8 years of Nicola Sturgeon, and everybody is forming some sort of movement. And, you know, like the all under one banner, all of us first, because they realise, these movements, that under the SNP, we've got no chance of getting closer to independence. And the reality is that far from getting closer to independence, we now seem to be in reverse, which is why parties like Aleppo have come up. And of course, it's no coincidence that the party is run by Alex Salmond, who was, you know, one of the greatest political architects, who did deliver on a referendum with 6 MPs in Westminster.
Yep, indeed. I mean, in 2021, you're absolutely right. In 2021, and this time we've lost Eva. 2021, there was at that point 5 independence parties. And from 1934 till 2021, there was only ever one. There was no need for a second one. However, I've got to say, Johnny D, who's in our studio at the moment, who's working the knobs along there and the dials with Hazel, he said to me in 2016, before a lot of this stuff had kicked off, because of the D'Hondt system in Holyrood, we do need a second independence party. So I think the talk of amalgamating, certainly Aleppo and SNP is wrong. We should keep the two parties for the list and the constituency. I think that makes sense. However, I'm willing to be corrected in that, but I think it's the way forward. Eva, one of the problems, and I have a question to you, a viewer's question from Mike Breslin, good man, which a lot of us know, a good stalwart, long-serving SNP man, who got in touch with me today, in fact. There's going to be a 4-week campaign for the new leader. Now, in our day in the SNP, there was a 4 months was the time. And now it's been condensed into 4 weeks. It's not a lot of time for the new kids in the block, the young lady McCallan, Kate Forbes, the wonderful Ash Reagan, all to get 100 nominations, 20 branches, whatever. It's making it very difficult. It gives Humza, and if Robertson stands, God forbid, a better run at it, doesn't it? It's gerrymandered. Have we got you there, Eva?
I think the problem with that really is, I'm here. They should have taken longer about the process, but it's up to their NEC to write the rules. But I think the members of the SNP would have been less disgruntled about the shortening of the process and would have welcomed a lengthier process if their independence conference could have remained in place. So to shorten the process but cancel the conference doesn't make sense, not if they want to be a member-led, member-driven party, as they used to be. What you've reminded me of there, Roddy, in 2014, in November 2014, 2 months after the referendum, when Alec handed over to Nicola, the SNP were sitting on 57% in the polls. 57%. Hardly been seen since, and they're not anywhere near that at the moment. And they need to get back to basics. And the basics are that they were a member-driven party with a strategy, and it was easily recognised that their priority overwhelmingly was independence. They've lost that. We've got to get that back. And by altering, especially at a time of crisis, which this year is, for many people, because of the cost of living, because of the impact of Brexit, because of the ongoing difficulties that are in part attributable to failure to recover from the pandemic, because we are in a very difficult set of circumstances, that party of government should be behaving far more responsibly than they are. It almost goes without saying that Nicola Sturgeon could hardly have picked a worse time to leave. And the impact of that upon the party and upon government could have been alleviated if those around her were managing things a lot better than they are. All they're doing is reducing credibility in the party and therefore reducing credibility of the government. And that is what Scotland and the independence movement need, like a hole in the head, especially right now. So I would strongly suggest, that somebody in the SNP who does not bear hatred or ill will towards the ISP or ALBA actually has the nous to pick up the telephone and start talking sensibly about how we get the independence bandwagon up and running again properly and sensibly. There's some people have suggested, particularly a friend of mine, Kate, that we should use that day in mid-March, which was going to be the SNP conference. We should use that as a movement, as an event where people can gather and exchange ideas. And I think that's a damn good idea because it comes from the grassroots and it will be a collective. It'll be up to individual parties, including our own, as to whether or not we participate. But I think it's a good start. And it's an example which the SNP would do well to take into account and to emulate. So instead of them having their internal squabbles, they should be looking at the bigger picture for the sake of the country and the people in it. For those in Scotland who do not have the luxury of a salary of tens of thousands of pounds and who have to worry about paying the food bills and the fuel bills and the council tax bills and buying school uniforms and the indignity of using food banks and, you know, baby banks and warm banks and clothes banks, none of which should exist in this country. None of it.
No,
those are the people that ought to be the priority of the SNP and the Scottish Government.
Yep, and there'll be a lot of people who will have booked up for conference and booked up accommodation and booked up all sorts of stuff. And as you say, they're not all in tens of thousands, the old Jock Thompson's bairns. Yvonne, the candidates are still, I mean, no one's really declared. Holmes is talking about it and says he's the unity campaigner and he's going to unify. I don't know who he intends to unify, whether that's just the SNP, all factions. Don't see how he's going to do that, or he's going to try and unite the Yes movement. But does he strike you as a Yes unity candidate?
Well, this might surprise you, but I quite like Humza Yousaf. And I can imagine that there'll be a few eye rolls out there. The problem that he has is that he will not, I don't think he's got the kahunas to stand up to the Sturgeonites in the party. He knows in his heart of hearts that the GRR bill is wrong. And, you know, he's a fellow Muslim, and I know that he takes his faith very, very seriously. And I don't think there is any way, if he, you know, putting his hand on his heart, he knows that it's simply wrong. But does he have the courage to stand up against the cabal inside, against the leadership inside the party? The party obviously is being run by this cult group who have no intention of reviving the old SNP, who do not want the old SNP. The reason I have a soft spot for Humza Yousaf is I remember that we both ended up on a march for refugees, and I had just come from London, where we've seen what Westminster does to refugees, and there I was standing next to the Justice Minister, who was chanting along with everybody else that refugees are welcome here. And I think his heart is in the right place, but unfortunately, does he have the backbone? And it will need a strong person to stand up and say, the GRR is a failed policy, throw it away. We've wasted too many years, 7 years in the making. We've wasted too many years and too much money. It's not going to work, and bin it. Now then, will he have the courage to do that? I don't know. But I genuinely think his heart's in the right place.
Well, the great thing about this programme is we allow all opinions. I disagree vehemently. But no, we do. Unlike these people who have been pushing GRR, who don't allow opposite opinions. We allow it, and I respect your opinion. I just don't agree with it. Because what we need, Eva, is someone who will stand up and say, we were wrong about GRA. We got it all completely wrong, and we're sorry. We were wrong about trying to imprison Alex Salmond falsely. We were wrong to go to the Fabiani inquiry and tell lies. We were wrong to attack the Aleppo party, who were, in all intents and purposes, a sister party and, a unity party. We were wrong to attack ISP. We were wrong to attack All Under One Banner. We were wrong to attack the pro-independence media. We were wrong on not moving forward in independence. But I've got to tell you, I don't see Humza or Angus Robertson, if he does run, or John Swinney, as is rumoured, who is allegedly, from what I'm hearing, Sturgeon's favoured choice to take over from her. Those old guards are not going to stand up and say, we were wrong, are they?
It's always a hard thing to do when you've been wrong. And especially so when your future career and your future income depends on persuading people to continue to vote for you and maintain a position of some power. I do not, under any circumstances, anticipate that John Swinney will stand. He's ruled himself out, and I'm glad about that because he's had his shot in the past at the party. Angus Robertson shouldn't be standing to be leader. There are lots of reasons for that, but one of the main ones is that he's been in a job as a Constitution Minister for goodness knows how long, and he has not advanced the cause of independence one iota over that time. In fact, I think that the polls have gone down over his period of being an MSP, having obviously previously been an MP before he lost his seat. So I cannot see that he has the drive to power the Scottish Government forwards towards independence, because if he had that ability, he would have been doing something cogent and sensible and driven and dynamic in the course of the last 2 years, and that he has not done. So he doesn't, to my mind, have the drive or the ability to get the job done. Humza Yousaf has had various difficulties in every department that he's ever managed. Yeah. We mentioned the hate crime bill, and that's one very sorry example. It took a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of consultation to get precisely nowhere, given that it's still not in force for reasons already referred to. Humza Yousaf's management of the NHS has been at times very disappointing, very disappointing. No, the Scottish Government really need to stop pretending that there are no problems, and when they admit that there are problems, they have to stop blaming everybody else. It's not just down to Brexit and the pandemic, although these are major issues. The principal problem with the NHS is management and funding, and those matters are not going to be appropriately addressed without independence. But do I see Humza as a leader of a Scottish Government? Under no circumstances at the moment. Maybe in 10 or 20 years' time, but not just yet. As regards the other, Kate Forbes wasn't able to vote in the GR bill, and I think that that's something that will need some explaining. Ash Regan will have a lot of support. She certainly would have my support for reasons. Right. We need somebody with courage and integrity, and it's perfectly clear that Ash Regan has both. She wouldn't have done what she did by resigning a junior minister position and taking a very difficult but principled stand, where she, without that courage, that took one hell of an amount to do. So I tend to the view that what the SNP should now do is think sensibly about a real unity candidate. It is not Humza Yousaf. He's not a unity candidate. Ash Regan is more likely so to be, because in the real world, the support for the GR bill within the party and within the country is very, very low. It could be binned for the time being and have a citizens' assembly about it later on, but the price of that will be the loss of the Green support and the Green ministers. But I would suggest that is a price very much worth paying to reinforce and instill confidence in the independence movement again.
Yeah, we seem to have lost Yvonne. Having a lot of wee technical difficulties here today. I hope it's not disturbing your reviewing, folks, and it's not too bad. But on that, Eva, the opinion polls have been all over the place this week. I mean, there was I go back to one was by Mike Ashcroft, Lord Ashcroft, if you like, ex-Tory chairman. YouGov, would you call him Zawandi or whatever his name is. All over the place, giving Labour a big surge back. And then the one that came out today from Savannah, which has the SNP Greens winning a 23-seat majority. So someone's telling lies. One of these, I'm glad to say I've always, and no one, anyone going through all my tweets or my blogs will see, I believe that opinion polls are there to form opinion, not really to give you opinion. The only polls I believe in are the ones in the ballot box, and to some extent the exit polls. The rest I take with a huge amount of pinch of salt. But there's no doubt that the SNP have taken a bit of a beating because of GRR, and that's why I go back to what we talked about really almost at the beginning. I cannot understand why Stephen Flynn or Mike Russell or Humza Yousaf or Angus Robertson would say, let's keep going with the same thing. It just doesn't make sense to me, Eva. Am I missing something?
Nope. Here's a nightmare scenario. What if Labour won? What would happen then if Labour won a Scottish election or Labour were in power in Westminster? We know what would happen in Scotland because we saw it before. Remember when Jack McConnell sent the money back to Britain?
Money. Yeah.
We can't go back there again. That was Labour mediocrity. And to dodge that completely and to create the Scotland that we want, that we need the Independence Convention. I know I bang on about it every week, but it's the way. That's, every country in the world that got its independence democratically had something like an independence convention, a citizens' assembly, a constitutional convention, where Civic Scotland, as well as elected politicians, can have their say and can have an open and honest dialogue with one end in sight, which is a concerted and hopefully successful independence campaign. There is absolutely no reason not to have it and every reason to have it. It doesn't matter what the polls say, except that Labour appear to be on the up, the SNP appear to be taking a hit, as you say. And if that's the case, that's bad for Scotland overall, it's bad for the independence movement, and it absolutely dictates that for the best for the people of Scotland is to have that convention and to have it now. Stephen Flynn can tell Nicola Sturgeon that that's what he wants. He can do that. Angus Brendan McNeil can do that. Mike Russell can see the sense in that. Dave Duggan sees the sense in that. Keith Brown sees the sense in that. Every single one of these SNP politicians knows that the way forward for Scotland is that independence convention. If they continue to refuse to have it, we can only assume that their motivations collectively are party interests, not national interests.
Oh, they have been, they have been for years. But that's the point, Yvonne. Welcome back. By the way, we thought we'd lost you there.
Well, my phone overheated. Can you believe that?
In Aberdeen, no, I don't believe it. I find that
Aberdeen.
to believe. Great stuff. But we can't go on down the same road. We have to get off, and if we're going to, we need we need to unite the movement, the entire movement. And for those who maybe don't know, I mean, I'm sure all our viewers know, Aleppo is the SNP activists party, really. It's all the people that went out campaigning. It was all the ones for the SNP that gave us 56 seats out of 59, who got us an independence referendum in 2014, who did all the campaigning. They're the people in Aleppo, and they will continue to campaign. We cannot, if we just change Sturgeon and put someone else in who's doing the exact same, we're not going to advance. But the most important thing is Murrell and his wife need to be pushed aside now to save the movement. We cannot wait 30 days 45 days, 90 days, whatever it is, and Murrell has to go and his wife has to go immediately. Am I right or wrong, or am I doing it again, Yvonne?
Well, no, as usual, you're right. And the important thing that people have to remember about the Aleppo party is that it was as a result of Sturgeon's reign. And if we really want to give the conspiracy theorists something to chew on, you just have to look at all of the dirty tricks deep state done in Northern Ireland to keep that country from becoming a united Ireland.
Yep.
And the same desperation and the same tricks have been played in Scotland. And the best way to destroy a movement is from within.
Yeah.
And the SNP was the only show in town for 90 years. That threat, that has gone now. They've destroyed themselves within. I don't believe that whatever dark forces have been at work will have the same chances with Aleppo or the ISP or any movements like all under one banner. But you're right, you know, Aleppo is stuffed full of activists, people who want independence. And I was really piqued a few weeks ago when Leslie Riddick said that, criticised the independence movement and said, you know, you've done nothing this summer. And I just thought she's so far out of touch. In our party alone, we had distributed more than 100,000 of the We Aleppo book.
Yeah.
And you know, it's been downloaded. Everybody must have a copy of the book or know somebody who does. It was an astonishing achievement. And whatever the shenanigans are in Holyrood, we will continue. And eventually we will get independence, because people like the Prism listeners are not going to let go of the prize. They're not going to allow themselves to be diverted. The one good thing the GRR has taught us is beware of even the most innocent looking sounding legislation, because this has wasted 7 whole years of the SNP's brains, and it's failed. But instead of just throwing it away, they're going to try and resurrect it in any way they can. It's like the British government's Prevent scheme. Prevent is a failed policy, but they won't accept it, and they keep on trying to dress it up. And as you said before, you know, it's the definition of insanity to continue doing the same thing again and again and again and expecting a different outcome.
Yeah, that is the way it is. Ladies, we've overshot our time again, and without Angry Phil, he's still lying in his bed somewhere in North Dakota. It's, you know, he was probably out last night in the razzle, let's be honest. God bless his wee cotton socks. But he's not been with us. I've got to thank you, ladies, for your time and effort. I'll just round it off by saying again, and I'll repeat what I've said before. Sturgeon has to go now. Get back on the back benches, and you know, you're done. Your time's out. Beat it. You're getting in the way. Every day you sit, and you and your husband sit, is a day that Scotland is held back. The two of you need to go, and go now. We don't want you anymore. You have done nothing between you to help our country. Get out. And on that note, ladies, enjoy the rest of your Saturday. And to you viewers, thank you for your time. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have, talking to my two dear friends. And until we see you again, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.